starting in the 1990s, both philosophers and policy analysts have been coming up with ideas about how we could use a rule of justice or a couple of rules of justice and go forward. So there's a couple of different ones you would use. You could say, well, historical responsibility is what really matters. You could say that ultimately it's a goal of society to protect the most vulnerable. You could say that it's all about equal burden sharing. You could say that everyone has some kind of basic right to the atmosphere, or maybe they have a basic right to development space, or maybe they have a right to some sort of climate security. One of the dangers with using any single one of these and trying to make an equation with it is that as soon as one party feels like they have their needs served this way, it's necessarily going to impede other parties' interests. And it's also going to mean that different parties whose interests might actually align often end up in situations where they're at odds. One of the things that I found very exciting and interesting about the basic papers that came out was that they established a very clear ethical framework that said we have a limited carbon budget, we have a historical responsibility to divide it within that. Using that kind of a single, strong argument is helpful in some ways, but is dangerous in others. From a helpful perspective, it really highlights that the way things have been done to date has not been fair, and that if we want to move forward, we have to have something that deals with the basic needs of the majority of the world's citizens better. On the other hand, the danger of using very zero-sum framings is that it leads us into justice stalemates, where no one can agree on what they're going to do. So one of the ways around this, and something that we've learned from perceptions of justice research, is that if you flip it around a little bit and work with sort of general categories of what people fundamentally care about, instead of just having one overarching equation, rule-based approach to justice, you might be more likely to find overlapping areas of interest where people really can work together and where you really can find cooperation. So you might find, for instance, a strict historical responsibility framework might actually contravene some countries' abilities to develop because they have a need-based approach and it won't actually answer that. One of the problems with a historical responsibility approach only is that it doesn't always include adaptation. And if we want to include adaptation, we have to change it a little bit to incorporate that, which is fundamentally a need-based approach. So there's a handful of really core equity principles that people are using in this space. And the challenge is to find ways where they can overlap as much as possible. And if you take just one, you're very likely to end up alienating a lot of people and not getting very far very fast.